I call the Tuesday, August 28, 2018 work session of Portsmouth City Council to order. And Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mrs. Lucasburg. Here. Mr. Moody.
Here.
Ms. Simmons.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Dr. Whitaker.
Present.
Mayor Rowe.
Here. And before I start, I just found out that Bill lost his brother this morning. Older. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. We have our sincerest condolences.
Thank you, Mayor.
Dr. Patton.
Yes. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council, the first presentation this evening, Mr. James Wright, Chief Engineer, will provide an overview of the Department of Engineering and Technical Services. This presentation will include a summary of the department's service delivery to include engineering support and technical service, and a brief listing of the types of projects the department has oversight for the city and the Portsmouth Public School System. The second presentation is a two-part presentation regarding the Law Library and Towing Advisory Board. City Attorney Solomon H. Ashby Jr. will present for your consideration and deliberation the purpose, status, and legal considerations for the restoration of two defunct city boards, the Towing Advisory Board and the Law Library. The Towing Advisory Board is ordained to advise the City Council about issues and contracts affecting the towing or storage of vehicles. The Law Library Board is ordained to control and manage the city law library. The next discussion will be Mrs. Cheryl Spivey, Chief Financial Officer, will provide an update on fleet funding in accordance with the city's capital improvement program. Mr. Wright.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Tonight I'll give you a brief overview of the engineering department, some of the services that we provide, and some of the projects that we're working on. The Department of Engineering and Technical Services consists of engineering, traffic engineering, stormwater compliance, and the parking authority. There are three departments listed there: the engineering department, traffic engineering department, and the parking authority. Stormwater compliance is technically a division of stormwater in the public works department. There are two enterprise funds, the parking authority and stormwater. They're both enterprise funds. So our mission is to ensure public safety through compliance with local, state, and federal regulations and standards. You see here a listing of the city ordinances and some of the other specifications and standards that we need to adhere to. These are the key ordinance and regulations that we adhere to for the majority of activities that we engage in. We must be vigilant in the ever-changing regulatory landscape so that we can be aware of how these varying changes impact our codes and standards. For instance, when FHWA makes a change to one of their standards, it impacts VDOT standards. And then, because a lot of our standards are based on VDOT standards, it impacts our standards specifically for things we do in the roadway, traffic signals, and things of that nature. The majority of our construction projects use all or some portion of the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission regional standards. And then our state and federally funded transportation programs, not only do they use VDOT standards, a lot of them have wage rates. And so we need to be cognizant of changes to those requirements as well. So it's constantly looking to see what's changing and what those impacts are going to be so that we can be vigilant in how we not only conduct our business, but how we advise other folks on conducting the business that they do as well. So the engineering department, these list some of the main services that we provide. Project management, we have the capability to take a project from start to finish, or we can step in at any stage during a project. So if another department or something needs, say, inspections or needs help to scope out a project, we're available to do that. Or we can, depending on what the project is, we can start from the finish and take it through the very end through project closeout. All development eventually comes through our department in some format. Generally, that's in the plan, in the form of site plans. We route site plans throughout the various departments that are involved in the review process, and we have the final approval in those plans once we're assured that all the requirements are met for each department that reviews the site plans. One of the things that you may not be aware of, through our city surveyor, we provide a tremendous amount of support for the assessor, city attorney's office, public utilities, and economic development, all matters dealing with land, whether that be acquisitions, easements, plats, and things of that nature. Traffic engineering. We maintain and manage the traffic signal system and roadway signage and pavement markings. We have 122 signalized intersections, approximately 28,000 roadway signs, and on those 881 lane miles, we have a significant amount of pavement markings. We do traffic studies and signal timings, process hauling permits for oversized vehicles. We review temporary traffic control for lane closures and all types of construction activity work in the right-of-way. And we also provide traffic control for severe weather events and special events. Stormwater compliance. Responsible for basically everything that's involved in our stormwater permit, which we get from the state, which is ultimately a federal permit. So the federal EPA has oversight over DEQ, which it gives us the permit. So we not only report to DEQ, we report to EPA. And these are the general compliance measures that are in our permit. So construction site runoff, those are inspections for land disturbing activities. Post-construction runoff control, those are inspections and monitoring of stormwater management facilities, otherwise known as PMPs. Stormwater pollution prevention plans and inspections for operational facilities and SOPs for compliance. That falls under our pollution prevention and good housekeeping. So that's how we keep all our city operations forces compliant with the stormwater permit, both the operations yards and their activities as they relate to anything that could be could get into the stormwater system. We have spill response to include contracting for cleanup, reporting to DEQ, education, and follow-up for illicit discharges and for illicit discharge detection and elimination. Our public education outreach, we visit schools, civic leagues. We're a member of the PDC, so we're a member of HR Storm. And then, like everyone else in the region, we're subject to the Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily loads, and we have nutrient reductions that we need to achieve each permit cycle, and our permit cycle is 5 years. The Parking Authority maintains and manages city-owned parking facilities to include rental and leasing of parking spaces and enforcement of parking regulations in the downtown parking district. They also provide sports for special events and concerts. You see there the 5 garages and the surface lots that we have in both downtown and Old Town. So to get into now some of the projects that we're involved in. So this is a partial listing, not a complete listing. I've broken it up into categories. So you see significant infrastructure projects and regional projects listed here. You see Churchland Bridge, seawall replacement. We're the liaison for VDOT. So on those VDOT projects, Turnpike Road, MLK project, projects over at the PDC and TPO, the Regional Connector Study and Bowers Hill Study. And also on the stormwater front, anything we're doing with the state as far as Chesapeake Bay TMDL and the watershed implementation plans, we are not only a liaison for the city, but we actually have requirements that we need to meet for our own permit. So we're engaged in all levels of that process. See a listing here of transportation and stormwater projects, partial listing, rail to trail, Effingham street improvements at the Portsmouth Naval Center, the Ebony Heights drainage improvements, George Washington Culvert replacement, and a number of tide gate installations that we have on an ongoing process throughout the city to address some of the flooding. Significant projects with Portsmouth Public Schools, Churchland HVAC, the new middle school. We're currently on top of 4 roofs, which should be complete before the end of September. We're working restroom renovations and stage auditorium renovations, so we have a good working relationship with their special projects manager, and we work to scope out the projects and then execute those projects in coordination with the schools and with our finance department. Do a number of projects working with economic development and public safety. So see a few things here as far as wetlands delineation and environmental assessments. Once again, as far as land goes, you see appraisals, building demolitions, and the last 4 projects relate to public safety and the Crawford Gateway revitalization. So those projects are listed there. We do work with Parks and Recreation, miscellaneous projects at Paradise Creek Nature's Park, at City Park, and at Bidawee. We're currently working at Cavalier Manor Athletic Complex on the final phase. We anticipate plans in before the end of the month for the site work at the Sportsplex. That should go out for bid next month and get under construction shortly thereafter. And then there are facility assessments and other miscellaneous improvements for those sites. The last slide I want to show to you is we have a number of on-call consultants that we procure throughout the year. They're available to every department within the city. That's a listing of the ones that we currently have contracts with. But I also wanted to show you that we do our best to leverage our city funds, and we go after a number of grants and other funding programs. So since 2013, as far as stormwater projects, we've been able to get $3 million for transportation-related projects, just under $34 million, and for other projects, just under $300,000. And that's just a listing of some of the programs that, when applications become available, if we have projects that fit into those categories, we put together applications and go after those funds. With that, I'll take any questions that you have.
Questions?
One out.
Bill?
James, just an update on the River Shore Road, the drainage pipe that seems like it's more complex than what it was.
I can speak. Excuse me. I can speak in general. It's basically actually a public works project. Mr. Khalil is here, but basically you had a cave-in. Sorry.
Dr. Bath?
Yes, you asked for that last night, and we have the answer. You would like for me to read it?
Please.
Sure.
Okay. At the request of Ms. Mooney last night, working with Mr. Clear, the contractor is going to expedite the project at River Shore and is planning to open the road by next Tuesday, September the 4th, so that will be no impediment for start of school. And just in parentheses is weather permitting. Sidewalk and landscaping will not be completed by then, but that will be starting shortly after. But right now, we're only expecting maybe tomorrow some rain, the rest dry. We're looking to have that road open.
Good.
Okay.
Other questions?
That was a report back.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Ashby will come forward with the Law Library and Towing Advisory Board.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Tonight, we bring to your attention for your consideration and future action a review of 2 ordained boards established to service important functions here in the city of Portsmouth. And at the conclusion, we will be asking you to assist us in reconstituting those boards to address pending matters and to determine the path forward. First, we'll talk about the Law Library. And you'll see in this opening shot, this is a picture of the city's law library, which is housed in the main branch on Court Street. In accordance with Section 1976 of the City Code, the law library is composed of the city attorney as an ex officio officer, 2 practicing attorneys, a judge from the Portsmouth court, and a citizen who is neither an attorney or a court employee. The library board is charged with controlling and managing the city's law library and adopting such bylaws, rules, and regulations for the control and management of that law library. Here's an inside shot for those of you who have not been in that area. I will also make you aware that the law library provides public access to approximately 96 publications, including the Code of Virginia, state law, case law, and it also provides electronic database for legal research also. Again, the law library is a bit interesting in terms of as a board, because the state law provides that the law library shall have the power to accept and administer funds for the purposes of operating the library, including receiving gifts. And while the law library is funded in part by fees from court cases, the state law also provides that city council, as it relates to the law library, may in fact substitute some dollars if there's a gift given for the operation of city council, of the city law library.
What is the order of magnitude of the court fees that go towards the?
I believe there's somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 to $4. I think it went up to about $4 a couple of years ago.
In the aggregate, how much does that equate to in 1 year?
Budgeted amount is $30,000. Expenditures run in the 20 range, and actual figures end up in the $20,000 range. Much of it is spent on the legal research subscription, publications, but there's a portion that also supports personnel.
The unspent money goes into a law library fund?
It is
Question.
It is captured, in the most recent years, it's been dollars in and dollars out. To my knowledge, there has been no excess in the last 2 years.
I will have to get that answer for you, where the funds are actually listed in the budget.
The city code provides that, and this is a little interesting, that the city attorney shall be charged with the administration of the affairs of the law library under the supervision and control of the city manager, when in fact and practically speaking, it is operated in part in line with the rest of the city's library function. I have met, and I do meet annually with Mr. Todd Elliott as it relates to this matter, and we've discussed this over the last couple of years in terms of the law library function. But from a practical standpoint, they support the library within its regular operations, or as part of its regular operations. As I said before, there is a funding source associated with the law library fund. And it is for that reason primarily that we are seeking to have that board impaneled once again to address a couple of issues, primarily whether or not there's a need to have some of the law library function operate out of the courthouse. In some jurisdictions, the law library is actually operated within the courthouse. And so with the council's assistance in reinvigorating that particular board, I've already set up a meeting with the judges for the month of September to discuss whether or not there's a need to duplicate some of our functions over in the courthouse, or if there's some other additional services that may be needed over at the courthouse to support those services offered by the law library. In that discussion, at least from a staff level, Mr. Elliott has already confirmed that the staff he does have dedicated certainly have the capacity to render some level of service over at the courthouse. It's just a determination of what the needs are, both by the bar as well as the court, if they have any additional need for services as it relates to the law library. Any questions on that one?
Elizabeth?
Who uses the law library?
Everyone. They will get citizens that come in and research their own matters. There are some how-to books, divorces. In preparing for today, I was looking at some of the fee issues. Even the court instructions on divorces all suggest you go to the main library and go to the law library section and look up various books on the issues of divorce. So where you have self-help and folks have differing issues, there's that opportunity. I've had a number of meetings in the law library section And so it does offer you an opportunity if you have those interests, as well as the research staff will assist you with the computer terminals in the library that offer some legal research
Are
services.
attorneys using it too, or is we talking about citizens, non-attorney citizens?
I would tell you that probably the bulk of it is non-attorney citizens, and that's part of the question, do you duplicate some service in the courthouse? Because I'll tell you from my experience in Suffolk, there is a law library in the courthouse, and so the attorneys between cases and whatnot will retire to that area, work, and do various things in that space in the courthouse. And so that's part of the question in terms of getting everyone together and finding out what the need is. In Suffolk, some of the funds were utilized for Wi-Fi, and this was several years ago. I believe our courthouse already has Wi-Fi, so then the question is there a particular need that some of these dollars or services might provide to assist the bar and the general public? But again, it is not meant simply for the attorneys in town, but also to render service to the general public.
Bill?
Thank you.
Laws change, laws are added in large amounts each year. Who keeps it current? Who actually does the grunt work?
The library staff does that currently, and of course, that is probably why, to some degree, we shy away to the online research services now, because it's much easier to update. And so there's a selected number of periodicals that are provided, much like any library now. They certainly provide a great historical reference or a complete recitation of particular areas of the law. But if you're talking about the most recent, you're probably looking at online, and there's probably a need to sit down and look at the current library and determine if we need to cull some documents and simply rely on online services and maybe reduce that size to some degree.
Does it have online services there?
It does. It's offered through the regular terminals that are provided for other library services.
Lisa.
The city librarian, so it's run out of the Court Street, so if we were to move a section to the courthouse, we would need an additional librarian, or who would run that then?
Well, in my discussions with Mr. Elliott, he has staff that can staff that part-time. We would open it and close it. It'd be a possibility to open it and close it, and then have some reference service or some person there for a portion of the day.
Can you go to slide 2? You're asking us, I assume that this is a board that's gone dormant,
Correct.
and so we need to repopulate those, which I assume that council appoints the 2 practicing attorneys and the citizen, is that correct?
That's the way it's situated currently. Yes, sir. And let me share one other piece. In a prior discussion with Judge Holder, she did suggest that perhaps to assist in this process, we make the pitch to the Portsmouth Bar Association and then
Well, that's where
kind
I was going.
of raise it from bottom up and see if there are folks particularly interested. And
To my colleagues, it seems like we have no choice under the city code to have this board. It sounds like a good board. So what do you all think about asking our city attorney to make this presentation to the bar and ask the bar to recommend 2 attorneys to us? What do you think?
Fine with that.
I think that makes great sense.
Okay. And then I'm going to ask the chief judges or the judges to make an appointment.
certainly,
If it can be from any of the courts.
any of the courts.
All right. Do we have a plan going? Yes, ma'am.
I have an answer for your question, if you'd like, on the library
Okay.
fund. The law library has its own fund, and currently the fund balance, the actual amount in there is $63,714.55.
So if revenues come in more than what is spent,
Yes,
it goes into the fund,
right,
and we have to appropriate the funds.
that's right.
All right. Do we have a plan going forward?
Makes sense.
Yes.
All right. And with that, we'll go to the next presentation. The next matter for your consideration is the Towing Advisory Board. And let me start off by saying I'm neither a graphic artist or I don't do these great things, and I always have to thank the City Manager's Office and Mr. Pace for making my presentations look better than they start out. And he does that on a regular basis on very short notice, so I'm very appreciative of him doing that for me. With regard to the Towing Advisory Board, again, we have a board that has gone dormant over the last few years, but that board is tasked both under state law and city code to advise the city council on appropriate provisions for any city ordinance or terms for a contract that affects towing or storage of vehicles. The board shall consist of a designee from the chief of police. The code says a designee from the director of general services, which is now public works, the director of planning and inspections or his designee, and those functions generally fall under inspections and permits, what we now call inspection and permits. The code also provides for 2 representatives from the towing and recovery operator community, those businesses that operate in the city, and 2 residents of the city. The Code of Virginia, again, as I said before, provides that in order to adopt an ordinance or enter into a contract affecting towing, there must be an advisory board to advise the governing body as it relates to appropriate terms and language. And I'm going to move through these because some of these points are a little redundant. Let me take you to the third point here at the bottom. State law and federal law do govern towing. And in the absence of a city code, it is state law and federal law that would govern the operation of towing services here in the city. But in order for the city to engage in that arena, we must have that board in place in order to address regulatory issues. And that's based on a 2009 opinion of the Virginia Attorney General. We have what I would call 3 types of towing. One that most folks are familiar with is police towing. That is when we have, say, an accident or disabled vehicle on the street. The police will often call from a list of pre-approved operators, and they will call out a towing company from that particular facility.
Speaking to that, how is that on a rotating basis? How does that list come about?
It is typically a list, what it has been is a list of state-approved individuals, and it should be a rotating basis, moving through the list as things go forward.
Is it rotating?
Yes.
Yes, that's the expectation in terms of it being a rotating and a running list going throughout. Now, one of the reasons that we're advocating the reestablishment of the Towing Advisory Board is because in the absence, and this is in a further slide, in the absence of a local Towing Advisory Board, generally complaints about towing go to the Office of the Attorney General in Richmond. And that's a little far away for a local issue. And so the reestablishment of the Towing Advisory Board will provide a more local response and feedback in terms of keeping our hands and understanding of what the towing operation and services are here in the city of Portsmouth.
Have we received complaints, and if they're forwarded to Richmond, are they giving us the feedback on what those are?
I have never received a complaint back from Richmond as it relates to a towing advisory matter. I've received the phone calls, and when staff met to discuss this issue several months ago, we still get the phone calls local. And so it does create, I won't call it confusion, but if we're going to get the calls locally, we might as well be a little closer to the response. And that is the issue we're presenting to you as council. If you want that more local feedback and control, then it would behoove us to reinstate the towing advisory board.
I take it we've had complaints, so we wouldn't be getting a presentation?
Oh, certainly you'll have occasional complaints about different issues, but as I said, I think I've had one that came to me personally in the last couple of years, and I think Dr. Patton is aware of one.
What's the nature of the complaint? Somebody's car got towed? It was...
Someone's car was towed out of a facility that had posted towing. It was towed to a facility that appeared to be closed on the weekend, and in accordance with state law, if it's closed during the weekend, you can't charge storage fees. But as I understand, talking to some of the police officers, there may be some operators who have closed facilities that you can call and open, but appearances just so happen I rode past the facility and it looks closed on Saturday. And so you will have those kind of issues. Where's the redress? And in that situation, the only thing I could do is direct somebody to Richmond, Office of Attorney General, Consumer Protection Section.
Bill?
I know a few years ago, one of the complaints was that we were towing cars to other cities. In other words, if your car was towed from Portsmouth, it might go to a facility in Suffolk or Chesapeake or wherever. Is that, hopefully that stopped long ago. Do we know for certain that's not the case?
I know some of these issues with towing, because I've been involved with them before, is you have the tow list, which the list is maintained in the dispatcher's office. And what happens when an officer calls, it's next one on the list. And I do know we have had tow companies that are on the list that do store the vehicles, like you're saying, in other localities, because they have to have a certain type of facility to be able to stow the vehicles. So I know we've had that before. And just as the city attorney was mentioning, the majority of the complaints are not coming from police-involved tows. They're coming from private property that has a contract with a tow company, whether it's, for example, London Oaks had a contract with a tow company. If somebody's in there that's not supposed to be, they just tow the car and take it away. And that's not really a police-generated tow, that's a private contract. So that's where the majority of the complaints come from. But odds are we probably still do have some towed out of the city just because of the number of the companies involved in it.
Do we do contracts with storage facilities?
I'm going to refer to Mr. Ashby because this has been his project and his studying it for some months.
We currently stow vehicles on in our operations center. We previously in 2014 were looking to remove that from a city operation and move it out to a private operation, because it would provide more security. It would clear our areas. You could operate more freely in the operations center. And so in order to move forward with that RFP for outside storage services, we would need to reinstitute this towing advisory board to deal with the elements of the contract for towing and storage. And there are three factors. Well, I would say there are three types of towing, and let me skip to the end and then we'll go backwards so you'll understand. There are three types of towing. Police towing, which is the vehicle accident. We have what I call the city impound, which is inspections and permits. At times we'll have a car towed off the streets. And then there's police impound when it relates to evidence. So that is secured for the lifetime of a particular case. So that is probably the three broadest categories of towing and storage that we perform throughout city services. And so in terms of the RFP, we're trying to address the city impound issues, and sometimes even the police towing issue may mean that a car towed off the street ends up on our property currently, as opposed to ending up on the towing operator's property. And so we can have a uniform and smooth transition amongst all of these. We're asking City Council to reinstitute the Towing Advisory Board so we can address the towing list issues. We can address, we have a venue to address private property concerns, rates within the city, and any other issues that may pop up.
The board doesn't regulate rates between a tow company and a privately owned vehicle.
No, but they could set the rate for the city. Now, currently, the state has a maximum. I believe most of the operators operate just below that, but again, that is a matter for which the advisory board could advise the council in terms of setting a rate. I'll work backwards from where we are. As you can see, many of the other cities have towing advisory boards. Absent a towing advisory board, certainly the local police department can address some safety issues in terms of contracting for what we call police towing. However, they may only deal with general safety concerns, proper equipment, the cleaning up of an accident, communication with law enforcement, and 24-hour availability to clear accident scenes. Any further regulation would require the advisory board and then the actions of city council. All towing companies must adhere with the federal and state law. State law prescribes the maximum towing fee, but there again, in the absence of a towing advisory board, as I said before, the complaints generally have to run through Richmond, which is a little inefficient. A towing.
Those kind of questions.
Okay, I realize the police have a list.
Certainly.
Who oversees the rotation, the qualifications? And what I'm getting at, there are a lot of moving parts to this.
Certainly.
Who's doing that now in the absence of
The police department has an officer, and Captain Venters is here. He can speak to a little bit more, but they have an officer as well as a chain of command as it relates to the current list.
Please come to the lectern.
Regarding the police records, we do have a list that's maintained in our dispatch center. It used to be a paper list on a clipboard. With our new CAD integration, we've been able to put that into the computer system, so the computer pulls the next one on the list. So the dispatchers don't have to try and keep up with who's been called. The computer does it for them. As far as making sure that they're safe, their facilities are proper, the police department, the traffic unit in the police department is responsible for maintaining. Anyone that wants to be put on the record list has to have their vehicles inspected, has to have their site inspected, because they have to comply with state regulation as far as containment and things to provide services to the police department.
Any other questions?
Yes. How many
Lisa.
compound areas are in Portsmouth versus outside of the city, or do you know?
That I don't know offhand. I believe right now we have, I believe it's 12, and may have just added 2 more records companies on the list. But I'm not certain how many are in Portsmouth and how many of them are out. And I can tell you that the majority of them, if not all of them, are in Portsmouth.
Bill?
Who monitors say a car is towed and it's in there for a long time. I take it that storage fees are being charged. Who initiates the billing and the collection of that currently?
I will tell you, some of that is operated currently out of Public Works, and the staff in Public Works I've gotten recently a letter from someone who was seeking to get back their clients, attorney trying to get back their clients' automobile, but it was still engaged in some police work, and so I had to notify them that there wasn't the opportunity to take those back. In the discussions we've had with staff, generally that discussion comes through the Public Works staff, Mr. Khalil's staff.
But that's for cars impounded at the city facility?
Cars in the city facility. And there are a number of different issues around city-held vehicles now. We have a level of concern and interest to privatize that aspect of it because it reduces the liability issues when you have vehicles for so long. You can have other folks in terms of making sure the vehicles are safe, secured, and that sort of thing. And we don't have to commit as much staff to that holding operation currently.
How about to the private impounders? Do we regulate what fee is charged to the general public?
Only from the towing, well, state law dictates the towing aspect of it. As we deal with this RFP that's going out, that will be part of the consideration in the RFP. And again, that's a contract with the city, not the public.
Nate?
I think what he's referring to is a tow, not an impound.
Right.
We're not involved. He's saying who regulates the storage fees and all that. It's basically a civil matter between the tow company and the owner of the vehicle towed. I think that's what he was asking.
For the general public, yes, that would be a subject for the actual landowner or whoever has that particular towing and storage contract.
But in the bid, in the RFP that's going out, we will require a company to submit what their rates are.
Certainly.
Okay.
Let me just go over some things, and the city has no plans to address these issues, but the law provides that you could delineate an area of service for towing, various towing companies. We don't do that. It could also limit the number of persons engaged in towing services in the area. We don't do that, but the law provides for that. The only area I can see that we will probably weigh in on, of course, is equipment necessary in order to operate within the city. One follow-up point, as Mr. Moody has said, in my prior life, there was considerable concern about towing vehicles outside of the city where folks had great difficulty getting to their vehicles. And as staff has said, most of our folks are in the city, so we don't suspect we'll have any kind of issues of that sort.
Other questions? Can you go to page 2? Again, you're asking us to repopulate this board and to make it active.
Certainly. And I am told that there were a number of folks, there's some information on the last configuration still available to us, but as you can see, 2 towing and recovery operators and 2 citizens will be required, as well as staff would have to designate individuals to fill the other positions.
So it's a 7-person board with 3 of the people being city employees. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that specified by state code or by the city code?
State code has a smaller grouping than the city code does. I think the state code says a minimum of 5, I believe, and I think we have 7.
Well, it appears to me that the first question before us is, again, if it's on the books, we need to repopulate it. The next question would be, are you satisfied with these categories? Can you go back to 2 again?
Sure.
And if you're satisfied with the categories, it appears to me that our responsibility is to take citizens to tow company.
Perhaps Mr. Moody could announce tonight that you're looking at doing this and to encourage people of interest, and particularly the ones that are in the business, to apply.
We can certainly do that. We should post it online as well.
The only question I was thinking about was, we're looking here, it was 7, and I believe you just said there was a possibility of doing 5. Would we want to do the 5? That way we'd only have to have one resident and one tow company, because we wouldn't have but so many tow companies there, as you have to rotate people on and off of the board. You might not have many people to choose from if we continuously have 2, unless we're going to, unless we're not going to rotate them like we do to other boards.
Aren't you here, Nate? What's your reaction to that?
And you'd
Either
have
way.
more city employees than you would
Yeah.
people.
If we were going to reduce the number of people on the board, I would be for taking city folks off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I don't see why general services need to be on there.
You agree? or not?
No, I agree with what you're saying. I just,
Well, you want to start with this? Because if we reduce, we got to amend the code, right?
Correct. Correct.
See, let's try this, and if we can't find enough people, then we'll look
Okay.
at reducing.
All
And I
right,
just
so-
have one minor
Yeah.
thing with the eradication of Amendment 19, the Equal Rights Amendment, the chief of police or her designee.
And I will, I normally catch those and leave those appropriately.
Thank you.
This was just a pure verbatim
I didn't see that.
recitation. Everything 28,
Yeah.
everything 2015 forward says her in appropriate
Or
spots.
there.
Oh, well, there, that's an interesting one too. Let me,
Good catch.
let me, again, I mentioned early on that there was an RFP out in 2014 for privatizing some of these services. There was one applicant and the city did not go forward. We've had the RFP vetted. Police have set forth standards that they need in terms of the protection of their evidence. With the activation of the Towing Advisory Board, we can move forward with the RFP contract process, and then we will have, again, another venue to interface with all of the issues of police towing, storage, impound, and the like.
All right. Yep.
I think this is where we have to be careful if, say, somebody from Suffolk near the Carolina line bids on this thing. That I'm not for awarding this to anybody outside the city of Portsmouth.
Can you do that?
Because I think that would be a disservice to the citizens.
Well, as I said, Councilman Moody, I'm certainly familiar with the havoc it can wreak if you tow a car here and you place it in one city over in terms of storage. It was quite an issue in Suffolk because they were being stored in Chesapeake. So that certainly is an issue that we can
That's an RFP issue.
we can address in the RFP.
You can make it in the RFP that they have to have a lot.
Absolutely.
In Portsmouth?
All right.
That's
So going forward, Bill's going to make an announcement tonight that we're going to reconstitute the towing advisory, invite the citizens to apply. Let's ask the city manager to give us a list of towing companies in Portsmouth so that we, names, so that we can consider the 2 towing representatives. Is that agreeable with everybody? All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Dr. Pat?
Yes, members of council, Mrs. Cheryl Spivey will come forward to give you an update on the fleet funding in accordance with our capital improvement program, our adopted capital improvement program.
This relates to the capital improvements budget that we adopted.
Yes, they're adopted.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. As Dr. Patton mentioned, as authorized by the city's CFP, staff has begun working with our financial advisor, Davenport and Company, and our bond counsel, McGuire Woods, to move forward with a financing of our fleet as authorized in the most recent 3 CIPs, capital improvement plans. This financing would be general obligation bonds, the total amount would be $10,740,771. That will finance the fleet that was in the fiscal 17, fiscal 18, and now the fiscal 19 budgets. So 2 years of that fleet, has already been purchased, and as authorized in the ordinance that authorized the budget for this, we used temporary funds to fund those purchases so that we could combine for economies of scale for the financing. So the financing, again, we're working with our financial advisors and bond counsel on the financing. The total fleet that we'll be financing is comprised of about $4.5 million in fire trucks and about $6.6 million in other service vehicles. This type of financing does require a public hearing. We have tentatively scheduled the public hearing for October 9th, and that public hearing will be noticed. Want to know if you have any questions on this financing.
Bill?
What are the, other than the fire vehicles, what are the other?
It's it includes the police vehicles and any other vehicles that
Police automobiles?
yes, oh yes, yes. So any automobiles or trucks or fire apparatus that has been purchased or planned to purchase.
What about equipment like backhoes and things like that?
I have the list that I can
in the
provide, and I'm not sure if
Or
those.
did you just send it?
I will send
okay.
you the pages that you can look in your budget books and see the items that are in there.
You know, financing automobiles, what's the lifespan of a police automobile? I can see fire equipment that's going to be there for, 15, 20 years maybe. But an automobile is not going to be there that long.
That's right, and the RFP will be set up to allow financial institutions. Will be going to local, regional, and national financial institutions, and be set up with options. What we're referring to as the service vehicle, so that's the non-fire. The financing length on those will be shorter term, as in about 5 years, 3 to 7 years. And again, there's options based on what the financial institutions are proposing, and they can propose on all. There's 4 options, and they can propose on all 4 options, or just the ones that they're interested in. With the fire apparatus, the financing of those, the options are somewhere between 10 and either 15 or 20 years.
So what you're saying is that you've structured the debt the length of the debt to coincide with the projected useful life of the.
Life cycle.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
And then you further structured it so that it's like a menu. They can choose to do the whole thing.
Exactly.
You're looking
So
for the
we're
best
putting enough options out to get the city the best financing.
And you're looking for a response from the bond companies, right?
That's right, from the financing companies, which would include banks and other financial institutions.
All right. Yes, sir.
In using the bond financing, are there limitations as far as the limits that the city can allocate towards bond financing?
Are you asking whether there are legal limitations? I'm unaware of any legal limitations. These will be general obligation bonds, so they'll be supported by the city's general funding.
And so the city does not have any limitations on issuing bonds, like a limit dollar amount?
Okay, if you're asking about policy, we do have a debt policy that limits that.
Let's let the city attorney.
And I didn't, what I think Dr. Whitaker is asking is whether or not the city has a policy or an obligation in terms of how much debt we can assume based on tax revenue. And we do have a limit based on our taxable revenue.
And the Constitution limits.
Certainly. I thought you were speaking about this particular transaction. The city's overall debt obligations, this particular bond financing as well as others, that number has to be recognized and controlled for in all of the city's debt, but not in relationship to this particular matter. We're always watching that particular ratio and all of the city's assumptions of
So bond financing would be part of any type of debt that the city, and that would be limited
Yes.
by
Yes.
what you just...
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Lisa.
So the school bus fleet is separate from this fleet that we're talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
And follow up to my colleague's question, why wouldn't we include that instead of taking the $1 million out of the CIP? If we're going to the financial markets,
I can't answer that at this time, Mr.
is there
Right.
a reason why we're not doing that?
That's like for
Yeah.
now, we're,
Why don't we ask the city manager to study that?
I will and come back. We'll get that information back to you.
What was the question?
He's
The $1 million that we appropriate for school buses, why not debt finance that too? And I said,
let,
why don't we let the city manager give us her thoughts on
right,
that?
we'll get with the team. Okay. Thank you. We'll get that.
Okay,
Thanks.
everybody,
Good point.
for sure, we're having a public hearing
Yes.
on, this was already contemplated in the adoption of these budgets.
yes.
right?
Yes.
Yes.
We're having a public hearing on the 11th?
On October 9th.
October.
October 9th.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Any other questions? All right, Dr. Patton?
Yes, Mayor, and Vice Mayor, members of City Council, tonight we have the following items on the city manager's report that I will go through briefly. The first is the Adult Drug Treatment Court Grant, adoption of an ordinance accepting grant funds in the amount of $160,000 for the Office of the Executive Secretary of the Supreme Court of Virginia, and appropriating said amount in the FY 2018 grant fund for use by the 3rd Judicial Circuit Court for the Portsmouth Adult Drug Treatment Court. This program has been in existence since 2000. The second is an abatement of criminal blight, and I am going to have Mr. Ashby read and speak to that.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of council, you'll recall, I believe at the end of June, Jeff Miller gave a presentation on criminal and drug blight. This ordinance provides a mechanism to notify property owners if there is a drug or criminal activity problem. It provides a procedure to put the homeowner on notice and give them an opportunity to abate the conditions on that particular property. If there is no abatement of the activity, it provides that we can go to court and get some assistance in terms of addressing those. We have to provide notice of the concerns, and the property owner have an opportunity to offer a plan to rectify those situations. If the situation is not rectified, then we have the avenue to go to court and address those issues.
Any questions?
The next three items submitted by Sheriff M.A. Moore, and the first is a FY 2019 Asset Forfeiture Homeland Security Fund. It will be an adoption of an ordinance accepting $22,375.40 of federal asset forfeiture funds received from the United States Department of Homeland Security and appropriating said amount in the FY 2019 Sheriff's Asset Forfeiture Fund for use by the Sheriff's Department. The second is an FY 2019 Asset Forfeiture Fund, Drug Enforcement Administration. It's an adoption of an ordinance accepting $17,269.84 of federal asset forfeiture funds received from the United States Drug Enforcement Administrator and appropriating said amount in the FY 2019 Sheriff's Asset Forfeiture Fund for use by the Sheriff's Office. The third is Sheriff's Office Training Academy, adoption and an ordinance to accept $87,074.87 received by the Circuit and General District Courts, and to appropriate said amount in the FY 2019 grants the general fund for use by the Sheriff's Office for items needed to support the Sheriff's Office Training Academy. The next is a family partnership meeting incentive fund, adoption of an ordinance accepting funding from the Virginia Department of Social Services in the amount of $1,500 and appropriating said amount in the FY 29 Social Services Fund for use by the Department of Social Services for the family partnership meeting incentive program. The next is an employment TANF participants, and this is an adoption of an ordinance accepting an employment of the TANF participation grant in the amount of $122,269.64 from the Virginia Department of Social Services and appropriating said funds in the FY 2019 grants fund for use by the Department of Social Services to assist TANF participants with preparing to enter workforce and maintaining employment. The next is an Emergency Food and Shelter Program, Phase 35. It's an adoption of an ordinance accepting an Emergency Food and Shelter National Board Program grant in the amount of $5,891.50 from the Department of Homeland Security and appropriating the said fund in the FY 2019 Grants Fund for use by the Department of Social Services to assist Portsmouth citizens who have emergency shelter or utility needs. The next is an adoption of an ordinance accepting Green Streets, Green Jobs, Green Towns G3 grant in the amount of $30,000 from the Chesapeake Bay Trust and appropriating said amount in the VPDES permit compliance line item in the stormwater category for the FY19 Capital Improvement Fund for the implementation of the Court Street Green Street project. The next is Portsmouth Railroad Crossing message signs. It's adoption of an ordinance authorizing and supporting submission of a smart scale application for the City of Portsmouth Railroad Crossing message signs project. And the smart scale is a result of an intensive collaborative effort by the Commonwealth to bring localities and regional bodies across the state together to develop an outcome-based scoring system for transportation projects.
Any questions? Reminder that on the public hearing, I'm going to ask Dr. Patton to explain this, and she'll have the appropriate person
Mr.
come.
Ames, yes.
Under the unfinished agenda, it is styled as consent agenda. I'll ask the clerk to read both captions of both resolutions and ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda. So there'll be one motion for 18-311 A and B. Okay?
Okay, I have one more thing, Mayor. In your box is your August 13 and 14 City Council report backs. And I'd also like to call to your attention that in your report backs, Council asked the City Manager to arrange for the Crawford Bay Gateway revitalization strategy update on the Stormwater Park renderings that was presented to you to be presented to several different organizations, which is the EDA, PPIC, Planning Commission, and on this week at Bidawee Golf Course Pavilion, we will have the public engagement where they will be presenting the visuals to the public, and that starts at 6:30 p.m.
And that's this week.
That's this week, the 29th, which is tomorrow. It's advertised.
Okay.
That completes my work.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question on, it's a continuation from last night regarding the public hearing for tonight. And since we have the chief financial officer, I just have a question I want to ask her that I asked Mr. Ammons yesterday that I'm still not clear.
Okay. Yeah.
Dr. Patton?
Yes,
do you have that?
Mrs. Spivey, if you can come forward and answer.
And this is on 18-333?
Right, the new municipal fiber network
Okay.
public hearing.
We can go forward, but
Do you want the,
if it's the
CF?
fiber network, it may be
Well,
Mr.
no, it's
Okay.
a finance question.
Oh, she's on the public
The,
hearing.
the question that I asked last night was, why is it that we're using public-private partnership to finance this particular project?
Yes. Because the project is unique, and this is a way to get, others to present to us, is my understanding of why we went this direction.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because, and that's when you were talking about the bond financing.
Right.
The city needs to put in this municipal fiber network, has to be paid for. Either, I guess it's be paid for through a tax increase or by, I don't know, issuance of a bond or the public-private partnership. And what I'm not clear on, I still haven't gotten an answer, is why is it that we have selected using the public-private partnership to finance this project versus the other options that are available. And I haven't heard why the others have been excluded and why this is the option
Right.
that we have chosen.
Well,
She-
okay, go ahead.
yeah, she's new. What-
I was
and you're
just
pointing
getting
to
ready to
your
say,
chief-
Yes.
I was
your
getting
chief
ready to say that,
Chief technical.
yes, I was getting ready to say that,
Want him to come up and answer?
yes, could you come forward, Mr. Jones? Yeah.
CTO.
She wouldn't know that for Virginia law yet, as Mr. Hammonds explained last night what Virginia law
Good
requires.
evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. To address your question, Councilman Whitaker, it's not a necessary avenue of financing.
That's it.
It is a creative way for proposals and vendors to submit proposals regarding this project. Financing will still be accomplished the same way as if it would be any other project.
Right. Well, it was explained, I thought, yesterday that this would be a public-private partnership.
It has that ability to be one.
Well, it wasn't explained it has an ability to be one. It was explained that it would be a public-private partnership. And that's a way of financing.
Right, that is one avenue that it could be financed where the public-private partnership portion of that, if a provider wanted to do that, and it would be a lease agreement, that
Right.
is one avenue, or it could be a completely owned bond finance or.
Okay, yes, well, I guess that goes to the heart of the issue because the way it's been presented is that it's a public-private partnership.
It might be useful to explain to us, certainly to me, what's being built. Is it towers? Is it fiber optic? So would you start with the infrastructure explanation, please?
Yes, absolutely. For the genesis of this project will be a infrastructure project consisting of conduit within the right-of-way of the city. And within that conduit, you will have fiber optic cables. And those cables will connect municipal facilities, public safety, schools, economic development, and things of that sort to internet and data presence.
And what are we asking the private sector to do?
The private sector has the same type of architecture that if they, I don't want to say that it's an open access network, but the conduit will be there if the provider wants to extend their network as well. But as far as a provider building it, meaning a lease as a reoccurring monthly lease that we are currently being provided, ServiceNow will not be that.
I think you said will not be a lease.
Right. As it is right now, the city has a contractual agreement with Cox Communications that is billed monthly as like a resident would be billed for that service.
I'm talking about this particular, the design, construction of the network, that's going to be non-lease?
Right. Well, I will say there is a portion that if the creative financing of this were to be with a construction company wanted to upfront all the expense and then the city own it after X number of years, that is a avenue. The other avenues would be that it's just finance, we pay the construction company to do the construction, and it's a project, just a CIP project as anything else is.
Okay, so that goes to my question. So is this a public-private partnership? And I'm concerned about that because we have already seen the issues that can arise with a public-private partnership, and that is the tunnel. And so my concern is that if we're going to be using an option where the citizens end up paying a higher premium versus taxing or a bond, and that's why I keep asking, why are we using, what's the benefit of the public-private partnership? And I just want to be clear on it because there are some consequences to that, which we've already seen with the tunnel.
Mr. City Attorney.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, Dr. Whitaker, I certainly understand your concern. In the early discussions with Mr. Ammons and Mr. Jones, given, as we all have seen with the presentations Mr. Jones presents, given the cutting edge nature of what's being developed and how it's being developed, private-public partnerships, one, does present an opportunity for what I would call flexible thinking about financing the project. Certainly, we would have to check and make sure that that was feasible and made sense for the taxpayers. But it also puts the project in the hands of folks with the best expertise to do this. For instance, as opposed to the city trying to spell out all of the specifications in the manner in which to say construct a building or whatnot. Here you're asking the private sector to present both the manner in some respects and the financial process in terms of financing it from their end, and you get to choose based on their options as opposed to, especially in an area where this is not something we do on a regular basis. If we were building a school, a building, buying buses or something like that, we certainly have the expertise, and we've done that on a number of occasions. This particular project is unique, and so what we're trying to do is take advantage of the expertise on the private sector side to present the options for developing and financing this particular project. So that was the genesis. We could have tried to develop the standards from our side up, but it probably would not have been as good of a product as having the private sector offer what meets the needs. We set the parameters and they offer the means and the product.
Well, you can control for that in an RFP. And I'm just curious that once again, if it's a public-private partnership and we're having a public hearing tonight, I don't know how informed the citizens would be as far as even what questions to even ask. Because if they don't know how it's being financed, how can they come and address a public hearing and ask the critical questions that need to be asked? And so that was my concern that I wanted to bring to council, that if it's a public-private partnership, I think it's a lot more we need to be informed of before we can expect citizens to ask questions on it.
Good point.
Well, I think the question is the private part. If they're a partner, they're going to want a return on their investment.
Right.
And where's that return coming from? It'd be coming from the citizens, I would think.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
It's going to be.
So why wouldn't we explore putting an RFQ out, followed by RFP, and see what we get back? I mean, I think we'd be remiss not to look at that option versus bringing a partner in initially.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, Mr. Ammons had a previous commitment, and that's why he's not here, but he's at the 7 o'clock, and he is our procurement officer. I would ask that we have him to come forward as you had asked at 7 o'clock, and any questions that you has as it pertains to procurement, he is our expert of the city to answer.
Well, see, I asked a question last night, and all I'm getting is that it's a creative way of financing. That's not enough. We spent. Is this a $9 million project? I heard that announced. We spent more time getting detailed last night in a closed session on much less money. And here it is, we're about to discuss a $9 million project, and all we can get is that it's creative financing. I think that not only council, but the citizens should know more information so that they can at least ask some intelligible questions.
I don't disagree.
I agree with that.
May I ask a question, Mayor?
Oh, wait a minute,
Because let me just finish, because if I were a citizen, I would want to know, why am I going to be paying a premium for this service? Because that's what the public, like Councilman Moody said, they'll have to get a return on their investment. We've already seen what has happened with the tunnel and the return that they're getting versus other options that may be available. And that's the only question I'm asking. If public-private is the way to go, I would like to see the pros and cons of that versus just telling me it's creative financing.
Let's hear from Ray.
Yeah, and in agreement. I think our comfort level with the unknown when you go into public-private partnerships is on the table, I guess. And I think that's what you're saying, is that we need to know all the options and the extent of them and what they're going to cost and what's involved, because we know public-private partnerships, they're going to front their money, but like Bill said, the money's got to be paid back somehow. And the good example is the tolls. So, and I think that's where you're going, being careful with public-private partnerships and getting socked in a hole if you don't, get right down in it, involved, and we certainly can. We would have to depend on staff to do that. But I don't think you really need the procurement officer to tell us that. It's just, we're saying, I'm just hearing some of us say that we want to rethink whether or not we want to look at that option in lieu of what are the other options.
All right, let's hear from this one.
Maybe I completely misunderstood the point. I didn't think we were, first of all, A, we're not making any decisions.
No.
B, this is just one of the options, private. We're not anywhere that far down the road. This is just one comment. It may be that James Wright and Mr. Jones end up doing it all themselves. It's just, it's a conversation. It's not a decision. We don't know what anything is.
I don't agree with that.
No, when it reaches public
I don't
hearing, it's
agree.
beyond a conversation.
It's deeper than that, Elizabeth.
Okay, then I'll listen to the city
We heard
manager.
last night that we've already received 6 proposals. And so what I understood, the explanation last night, that this was a public hearing on those 6 proposals.
Yes.
I think Dr. Whitaker's point is really valid, that we need, okay, that's one option. What are the other options, and what is the cost benefit? What is the advantages and disadvantages of each? And the only comfort I have is that it's a public hearing in which you're not asking for any action. Let's hear that. But I think council, I think you're saying almost with one voice, that show us what the options are. Build it ourselves, something else, public-private partnership, and show the advantages and disadvantages of each, and why we should choose A over C or C over B.
And I was going to say, and those should be some figures. There should be some figures. That shouldn't be something that we're in a council's regular meeting and someone just gets up and talks, because it's going to go over not only our heads but also the citizens listening. And you need to have some concrete information.
This has been a good conversation. Tonight is a public hearing where we've listened. We're not going to make a decision, but we are asking you, Dr. Pat,
Yes.
to show us what the alternatives are to get the goal, which is to have a smart city,
Right.
and show side-by-side comparison and the advantages and disadvantages and the cost of each.
Okay.
Is that what we're asking?
What,
Everybody shake their head one way or the other.
Yes, yes.
I agree.
All right.
And, Mr. Mayor, when they do that, if it's going to be a lease involved, if that's going to be part, we need to know about that if there's
Sure.
potential leases terms.
And what implicit in that is no decision is made until it comes back to council. Lisa?
And as a member liaison with the regional fiber ring, Dr. Patton and also Mr. Jones sit on there with me on next Friday, September 5th at 9 o'clock. They're going to be connecting the regional rings for Virginia Beach and Norfolk. So I guess as part of this conversation, we need to see what other cities are doing to finance their ring, connectivity ring as well. So that we, are kind of similar to that, so that we don't be the last city falling in a hole again, like the tunnel told, so.
I see a hand where you had yours up first.
What our options are, we just need to know the levels and what they are. There's only about 2 or 3 options.
That's why I said 3.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know,
But
all
we need-
the cities do it.
we need to see it, the public needs to see it. We need to see them side by side and the cost and the benefit and the advantages and disadvantages. Bill?
In addition to the finance options, I really think the public needs to see, and speaking for me, I want to see more than we dedicated a public work session. What are we getting? And what is John and Mary Public, how's this going to benefit them? And how's this going to benefit the sub shop on the corner or the manufacturing company down the street? I'm not clear on that, quite frankly.
All right.
It's like buying, say, I'm going to buy something. That sounds good, but what are we buying? And what are the features and the benefits? What are they going to be? I don't
That's
think
a
we're
good-
clear on that.
That's a good point. Can we put this on the next Monday work session where it's pretty understandable when you say I'm going to buy a fire truck. We know what a fire truck looks like. But because this is something new, I think a very basic discussion, presentation, where you show us what the infrastructure is going to look like. That's what Bill is asking for. Let's start from there as you work on, now, in order to put that infrastructure in place, these are the ways that are available to the city to get that done. Okay? Is that it?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I would suggest too, as we have future projects, that we have this detail that we're requesting, detailed reports, so that, once again, not only council, but the citizens. I appreciate knowing what the departments are doing, but, citizens are being taxed and, they're financially tight, and I think that those type of decisions merit much more detail than I think we've given. And so, and just to close on it, I think if probably this amount of detail that we're going to have been given the citizens on that tunnel, that we wouldn't be having, because I don't know if y'all remember, but we had a person from Department of Transportation, I believe, came in, and we asked about whether there had been a gasoline tax versus a toll, and the tax would have more than taken care of the tunnel. And so that's what I'm saying, looking at the different options.
Dr. Pat?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, what we have had over the last probably 4 presentations has been Mr. Jones making presentations to council leading up to tonight. What we will have him to do is to go back and layer all of what he has been presenting week after week at our Monday nights have been, and to now layer over the questions that you're asking, because this project is not something that we didn't bring it all in at one time. It started in the 2016 budget, 2017 budget, 2018 budget, and now it's at this point. So on Monday night, I'll give him full time he needs to go back and layer it all, how we've gotten to this point, which would including those things that you've asked tonight.
Hopefully with visuals.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some schematics and visuals in his
Map of the
presentation.
city, show where the
Yeah, we can
lines
do
will
that.
go,
He's got some of that in
be
there.
connected,
Yeah, we've got
what's going to
that.
be above ground, what's going to be underground.
We've got that.
I mean, in all good faith, there have been presentations made. That's not the issue I'm raising.
I understand that, no.
And
But-
I agree, I don't want to go through all of that again. I mean,
I understand.
How many people want that basic discussion?
Well, I think
You
the
have to
question was,
understand it.
that, I mean, if a council person wants that.
yeah, I mean,
knowledge,
I'm not
yeah.
objecting to
Okay.
that. I'm just telling you what
Okay.
my opinion.
I'm trying to get a
Because I
sense.
understand what it's looked like and what he's trying to do.
All right.
You know, what a network is and,
But it hasn't been in the context of finance.
right, and that's the question.
I think it's a good thing for the
And
public.
the end user.
So we're going to do that on Monday. And at the same time, the next Monday, at the same time, you're going to be developing the alternatives for getting this done. Okay? And the cost benefit of each, the advantages and disadvantages of each.
Cox is charging our people $1 billion.
Okay.
Yes.
And
All right.
compare with these other cities who
Yeah.
also have to connect
got
into the stream, how they're doing theirs.
I don't know whether that's
All right, let's go.
relevant.
Do what? Let's move
Other
on.
cities,
All right. We
also
know-
about the same.
We have given
I have
our
the
direction
direction.
to the city manager.
Yep.
Let's go to liaison reports. Dr. Whitaker.
No.
Yes. At Hampton Roads Regional Jail Authority Board, we met on August the 15th. Some of the good news is down to 12 vacancies total at the regional jail, and some of those are admin. So the correctional officer staff is almost complete, and they're working on it. Reference to the medical reports, there's 4 individuals in there. No, actually, there's 5 now that are on dialysis. There's 44 people receiving HIV medications that cost $131,000 just for the month of July. There are 18 pregnant females in the facility, and 2 of them are receiving opiate replacement drugs. There's 7 cancer patients, there's 17 males over the age of 65, and there's 2 paraplegics. 2 things, good news that was given to us, there were 2 life-saving awards issued. One was to a group. There was an attempted suicide in the facility. The correctional officers located it in time. They provided, first response, first aid, medical treatment. They were transferred to the hospital where the individual survived. Another one was individual in there had some stomach pain. The medical staff sent him out to the hospital. It was determined that he had internal bleeding, that if they hadn't determined that and sent him out, possibly would not have survived from that. Everything else seems to be going really well there. They're still working on some of the Medicaid and Medicare issues, and some of that's going to depend on the length of stay when they are transported to the hospital. We revised that as of at the end of July, the population for the city of Portsmouth, we had 194 individuals in there. We're currently paying for 250 beds, so we have 56 empty beds. So that's something that we need to have a discussion with the Sheriff's Department as to why we have those empty beds that we're paying for. So that's something maybe Dr. Patton can talk to the Sheriff more about, because if we're paying for those beds on a daily basis, we're required to fill them. They should be filling those beds. So that was it for the regional jail, and that's all I have. Thank you.
From the Port and Industrial Commission, our meeting, monthly meeting was this morning, and Randy Sturgeon from the EPA was here, gave us an update, a very extensive update on the ongoing work at what used to be the school property that is now owned by the PPIC out at Burton's Point, where the dredging continues there in front of the Jordan Bridge. The good news is that dredging and the landfill that's going on top of what is the PPIC property looks like it's going to be completed by February of 2019, which will make that property available for sale as industrial property, which is very important and good news. From the Economic Development Authority, I think I've said this before, but it's worth repeating again. The EDA owns 8 properties in the city that have been marketed for redevelopment, and all 8 properties, which are under contract to DeVaris to sell, either have pending sales or very significant interest. Economic Development Authority at the August meeting signed an agreement with a developer for 700 and 710 Crawford Street, just across the street, for a developer who is looking at building multifamily units. That will come before this body in a few months for a conditional use permit. So that's more good news. Another comment sort of related to the port, not really my liaison report, but just something to keep an eye on that's in the national news, the possible Chinese tariffs that are being discussed on the federal level could have a very significant impact on VIG. If those tariffs go through, the port will be looking at in excess of $10 million for the new cranes that are coming in. And those cranes that are coming into VIG and just went into NIT are only made in China. They're not made anywhere else in the world. So that will have a ripple down effect for sure.
I have no reports.
Oh, right. We have a need to go into a closed session. Is there?
Before we do that, can I just ask for a couple things I'd like to get information back on?
Sure.
One, I just want to get information back. It's been a while back that we voted on reference to the Tidewater Builders, the class that they put on, that we voted to sponsor some individuals. I wanted to see if anybody to this date from our city has attended or been going to that class. And the other thing I'd like to just get some information on, a while back I made a suggestion, a recommendation, since Portside is being rebuilt, I made a request that possibly if we could return the iconic red phone booth to Portside and possibly make it a cell phone charging station to make it phone related. And I just want to see if we still have that somewhere in the city, if that can be done. Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir.
Also, in regards to the council rules and procedure change regarding persons being able to speak on agenda and non-agenda items, I sent an email out to council just suggesting some language, and overall the policy is fine. It was just that first sentence. Just wanted to make sure that we were clear that it mentioned about signing up, but everyone that speak doesn't have to sign up. And so that language, and then it was some language in there about business, and I didn't want that confused with new business and unfinished business, but persons can speak at other areas as well. So just a clarity.
I haven't read your email.
Okay.
So everybody look at the email, and let's put this on our next agenda too. Bill?
Feedback, and maybe the city manager said that's in our box about the equalizer, how that affects.
No, that is coming for your September, the first Monday in September.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's in the box, and the
and
date is there.
The COLA for
Yeah,
widows, widowers.
that's in the box.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
good. Is there a motion to go and close session?
Mayor.
Yes.
You're right. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, we don't have one.
Oh, I saw her passing out, I thought she did.
Deborah's timing is impeccable.
Working on it.
Talk to him between.
Would somebody read the motion, please?
I move to go into closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A7 for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the city, specifically regarding Victory Crossing Developers 2 versus City of Portsmouth, Virginia et al.'s Portsmouth Circuit Court Case Number CL16003612-00 and Victory Crossing Developers 2 versus Economic Development Authority of City of Portsmouth, Virginia, Portsmouth Circuit Court Case Number CL16001977-00 and 01.
Second? Okay, we have a motion that's been duly made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mayor Webb?
Yes, we're in closed session.